Grazie ragazzi, willkommen and bienvenue to Cannabis Scienzias live on LinkedIn. Today, like every week since almost 2 years now, we will provide your weekly dose of science behind cannabis. And today we will read an excerpt from our handbook, Principle of Clinical Cannabinology. This handbook, as maybe you can see from the index, covers various aspects of the world of medical cannabis, ranging from the endocannabinoid system to the pharmacologies of cannabis constituent. Moreover, in the book, we analyze the various pathologies that can be effectively treated with cannabis. And moreover, in our last chapter, we explore the regulatory frameworks in European countries that opened up to legalization of medical cannabis. Additionally, in our handbook, we offer various insights into topics related to medical cannabis, such as the utilization of cannabis during the COVID-19 pandemic and the latest discovery pertaining to new cannabinoids. In today's LinkedIn live session, our discussion will center around a common concern surrounding the legalization of medical cannabis and the establishment of dispensaries or pharmacies like in Europe that sell cannabis. The question that we would like to talk about today is, does the introduction of regulation that allows the selling of medical cannabis and more broadly of cannabis in general increase its consumption among young people? And we will explore data from an American study. This concern, the concern of an increased consumption of cannabis among young people, is a significant concern. Indeed, we have to say that, for example, the human brain continues to develop until the age of 22, 25. And so regular cannabis use during this critical period may interfere with cognitive function. Now, while the majority of studies do not indicate a direct impact of cannabis consumption on brain development, some research suggests otherwise. For instance, certain studies propose that cannabis may affect the development by potentially reducing the size of specific brain region, such as the frontotemporal lobe. Now, while the extent of this reduction's impact on cognitive function remains unclear, it is very important, it is mandatory to ensure absolute safety for young individuals. And so stringent measures are due when we talk about medical cannabis. And what I want to say is that to be 100% sure of not creating harm, cannabis use should be banned for young people. And so this is the question. Does the legalization increase consumption among young people? Legalization of medical cannabis and also recreational cannabis. To answer to this very important question, we will explore what the science says. Indeed, there have been a large amount of studies on this topic, but we choose a study from the United States analyzing the 46 states in which cannabis have been legalized for medical or for recreational use. As we go, we will read this excerpt and this article. We will see that Contrary to popular belief, the evidences suggest that the availability of medical cannabis or cannabis in general and the presence of dispensaries or pharmacies do not act as a catalyst for an increased usage among young people. And so, undoubtedly, this study, along with all the other studies of this kind, carries significant implications for a lot of subjects, for example, for policy making, for public health, and also for social perspective. But without further ado, let's start this reading. And so, the paragraph is the 3.16. The title is Inside Cannabis Use Data from an American Study. And if you want to follow me during this reading, you can go to page 460 on your digital copy or paperback copy of our handbook. So let's start this reading. A 25-year US study monitored cannabis use in states that have legalized in favor of medical cannabis and those where it is not yet legal. Comparing the data, no evidence emerged that the legalization of medical cannabis and the creation of dispensaries encourage use by young people. So, as I was telling you before, this study analyzed the effect of cannabis legalization in 46 USA states, analyze both the one that open up to medical or recreational cannabis and one that still don't have this kind of regulation. Comparing the data, the authors of the study try to understand if the legalization of medical cannabis have an impact on young people, especially if the creation of dispensaries, because in the States they have dispensary, contrary from Europe where we have pharmacies that sell medical cannabis. The opening of this dispensary, the conclusion of the study is that the opening of this dispensary do not encourage use of cannabis by young people. But let's say the argument in general. And let's start to analyze the cannabis use in young people. Young and very young people usually approach cannabis driven by group dynamics, a task for transgression, or the desire to try something different. And this is usually why everyone starts with the use of recreational cannabis. So just for this study, this today's topic, we don't think broadly of medical cannabis, but we talk about cannabis in general. In this first approach to the substance, they, young people, are practically left on their own because although considerable changes have taken place over the last 20 years, talking about cannabis or drugs in general at school, in the family, or in places where people get together is still often taboo. So, what this article says that even if cannabis use is very common a lot around the world, especially in Western countries, talking effectively of cannabis with, we can say, with authorities such as the school teacher, but also the family or other entity, can be really challenging because cannabis is considered as a taboo. There is still a lot of stigma around this substance. Indeed, the illegal status of cannabis in many countries of the world certainly does not help young people to find information easily. So they often find themselves without anyone to confront and without being truly aware of the substance they are taking. And this is very important because only conscious consumer consumers that know what they are taking can have a right approach towards cannabis, but towards every other substance, like drugs in general, especially drug of abuse. The fact that one is forced to turn to the illegal market to purchase cannabis in most cases complicates the situation even more. Sometimes one is dealing with real criminals, and often one has no guarantee what one is actually consuming. This last point is of crucial importance because the effects of cannabis, both the sought after and the harmful ones, depend on the content of active ingredients, THC and CBD mainly, the dose, the mode of administration, and the interaction with other substances. So basically, of course, to be aware of what you are consuming, you have to go in a place where, like for every drug, there is something written about the effect and the precaution for the use, because also for cannabis, of course, there are precautions. But if you go to illegal market, where most of the people around the world still go to buy, to purchase cannabis, of course, criminals have no intention to inform people. They want just to sell drug to gain money, and so every advice cannot certainly be cannot be proposed by criminals. And this is, for example, just this should advocate for a legalization of cannabis. But let's go on. The risk of cannabis use among young people. Let's analyze what are the potential risks for the health of young people. In young people and adolescents, the potential risk in taking cannabis relate mainly to the possibility of developing physical and psychological problems. Adolescence is a crucial period for neuronal development when critical synaptic and structural changes occur, especially in brain regions involved in cognition, self-regulation, and emotional processing. From birth to over 20 years of age, the brain is in continuous development. During childhood, there is an abundant formation of new synapses, particularly in the cerebral cortex. Thereafter, there is a process of pruning with the elimination of unused or redundant connection and the improvement of synapses that are utilized. The brain, however, does not mature in all regions at the same time. More rudimentary regions, such as those enabling movement and somatosensory function and general information processing, mature early during the infancy, while others, involved in impulse control, strategic planning, or social behavior, mature later in adolescence, along with the development of the prefrontal cortex. So now we are analyzing how human brain develop from starting from infancy and going on through the adolescence until the adult age. And we see that there are a lot of change, of course, a process called pruning of synapses that step by step make the young brain become an adult brain. All these changes can be seen as a complex, genetically modeled process of consolidation of the hubs of the brain's anatomical network. This consideration indicates that the adolescent brain is in a continuously remodeling structure with complex neurophysiological processes leading to the formation of new circuits. This implies that in adolescence, the brain is more fragile and prone to damage, and this is well known and well established. The psychotropic effects of cannabis are mainly due to the THC's interaction with CB1 receptors, which are abundantly expressed in the brain. Various studies in recent years have sought to understand whether cannabis use in adolescents is at risk of developing neurological problems such as psychosis or mood disorder. The often conflicting results were summarized by Prof. Stefan Dane of the University of Leipzig, who, in an article that appeared on the journal Pharmacology in 2020, analyzed previous studies in this area. How I was talking you in the beginning, that there have been a lot of studies trying to understand the impact of cannabis usage during adolescence and during this period of brain development. The main problems associated with early cannabis use in adolescents are due to the impact of the substance may have on brain or cognitive functions. In particularly vulnerable individuals, cannabis use may lead to latentization of psychosis, a phenomenon by which the onset of psychosis may be accelerated or triggered. For this reason, cannabis is not recommended for those with a familiar history of psychosis or behavioral disorder. What happens in brief? It has been seen by various researchers and by various studies that there is the main problem regarding the use of cannabis in young people is the latentization of a psychosis. What means this word latentization? It means that psychosis that are in some way covered inside the person can be triggered by the use of cannabis. And what is very important that this is a true phenomenon, but it does not mean that cannabis induce psychosis. It is just a triggering factor. Indeed, it has been also studied that in people in which cannabis cannabis latentizes uh, a psychosis, the onset of the particular psychosis can be anticipated from 1 to 2 years. It means that without the use of cannabis, this particular individual would have developed the psychosis for sure, but in a later period of time. But this is a real problem. This is why the use of cannabis must be advertised for potential side effect and potential restriction of use. Professor Dane's article concludes by stating that it seems to make a difference whether an adult or an adolescent takes cannabis. Clinical and animal studies indicate that chronic cannabis use in adolescents may result in psycho-emotional deficits and may arrest personality development. However, not all individuals react in the same way, and there are large differences in the literature. Therefore, further studies are needed to clarify which risk factors may contribute to a negative effect of cannabis use in adolescence. So, in some people, the use of cannabis have to be avoided. And in order to do this, the only way to really do this is to control the access to cannabis. Because if the cannabis, both recreational or medical, is sold by the government, we can have a control on its usage. We can advertise on potential side effect and harmful situation that can derive from its incorrect usage. But if cannabis is sold by criminals, this is not possible. And this is a very important point because sometimes in the countries where cannabis for example, for recreational use is not legalized, are the countries that widely use cannabis. For example, in Europe, cannabis, recreational cannabis is not legal anywhere except we can say Holland, and in the next month in Germany. But until now, it's not legally practically nowhere. But the first state for number of people that consume cannabis in Europe is Italy. So legalization, the prohibition does not stop the consumption. It just gives the opportunity to criminals to sell this substance. But let's go on. The risk of cannabis use among young people. While the concern for young people is legitimate, data from countries that have legalized for greater that have legislated for greater freedom in the use of cannabis can certainly help to allay this concern. So my opinion does not count. What count are data, are scientific data. So let's see what scientific data say about this topic. One of the latest studies is entitled Medical Marijuana Laws and Dispensary Provision Not Associated with Higher Odds of Adolescents or Heavy Marijuana Use, a 46-state analysis, 1991-2015, and this study was recently published in the journal Substance Abuse. In this work, researchers affiliated with Johns Hopkins University, Harvard University, and the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission examined data collected from a total of 46 states over a 25-year period. The researchers analyzed trends in cannabis use among more than 1 million adolescents from 9th to 12th grade school, using data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey collected from 1991 to 2015. So this is a very important study because it analyzes the habits of more than 1 million of young people in the whole United States of America. In the article, following in the footsteps of previous similar work, the researchers state that over the period from 1991 to 2015, they found no evidence of an increase in the number of adolescents reporting cannabis use in the 30 days prior to the interview, or heavy cannabis use associated with the enactment of laws regulating medical cannabis or operational medical cannabis dispensaries. So basically, what researchers found analyzing a large amount of data from 25 years deriving from 46 countries in the United States, they found that the fact that a state open to legalization or not does not impact on the usage of cannabis among young people. It means that there is a certain percent of young people that use cannabis, and this percentage is not influenced by the fact that cannabis can be legally purchased or illegally purchased. What does it mean? It means that cannabis use is something that is not associated to the legalization of the product, of the availability of the product in a legalized structure such as dispensary or pharmacies, but is associated to other factors that, of course, the study do not analyze, but we may think what they are. So, in conclusion, researchers state that the researchers also add that our main finding was that adolescents resident in states where medical cannabis has been legalized were significantly less likely to have used cannabis in the past 30 days compared to adolescents residing in states without medical cannabis laws, less than 6%. In analysis stratified by grade, ninth graders, that is the first years of high school, were 9% less likely, while there were no difference for the other grade levels. The conclusion of the study is somewhat most important than the rest of the study. Why? Because they say that not only the legalization do not open up to an increased use among young people, but the authors of this study found that in the states, in the US states where legalization took part early, young people are less likely to use cannabis. It means that in people where legalization is a fact, young people use less cannabis than in countries where legalization has not been yet approved. And this is very important, but this is the reality, because in a lot of countries of the world, using cannabis, especially in young people, can be something done for to do something illegal, even because it is illegal to be like an outlaw, to behave in a certain way like an outlaw. And this increase the consumption, the willing to consume cannabis among young people. But because we know that when people are young, they are more, we can say, rebel against the authorities. So if you forbid something, young people want this thing. But if something is not forbidden, prohibited, there is not this stimulus towards the rebellion. And indeed, in the countries where legalization of cannabis, both for medical and recreational use, took part since a long time, are the countries where young people use less cannabis. There are, I was telling you that there are a lot of studies similar to this. For example, all the studies in Europe also found this. They found that, for example, there were no differences among young people using cannabis among European countries, especially between European countries and the Netherlands, because in Netherlands, even if there is not a legalization, a clear state legalization, the use of cannabis is tolerated since the 70s. In the Netherlands, there were not a big amount of young people consuming cannabis compared to other countries, but it was the opposite. It was one of the countries, it is one of the countries in Europe where there is less consumption of cannabis, even if it is so easy for young people to find this. So it's not the legalization who increase the use. The only thing that legalization can do is to regulate the access to cannabis products. So we finish this excerpt taken from our book. I show you again. Here you are, the principles of clinical cannabinology. This is just an excerpt talking about something that is not clearly related to the science behind medical cannabis, but it's very important to know. So if you want to know more or to understand more about medical cannabis, this is the book you can rely on. If you want to explore what is inside, you can check out our website, cannabiscientia.com. cannabis.com, and you can find all the relevant information. So I conclude now this live. See you next week with even more science around medical cannabis. Thank you for your attention, and see you soon. Bye.